We're back to the 18-inch Enterprise kit being built as the USS Constitution. So I've made a little bit of jump since our last clip, which was actually taping off the upper saucer section, that bolt cover, and then getting it all painted. So I've done that. I've taken all the masking off and actually just mated it to the lower saucer section. And you've got that right here. I'm going to show it to you right now. So it's all mated, glued, it's drying. And so as soon as it dries, we're going to pull that up and get all the clips off. And then what we're going to wind up doing is sanding and covering up that seam, getting everything nice and smooth. But I'm going to let this dry overnight. Actually, I may let it dry a little bit longer and just really set up and cure well. And then we can go in and do a lot of some nice sanding, and I can show you some techniques that I use and that I've seen also on YouTube that I picked up a couple of interesting things on. I'm pulling some tape out right now because what I'm doing is I'm taping up where those windows are on the rear of the saucer section because I'm going to be doing some sanding, but I don't want to lose those details because I'm not quite sure yet if I'm either going to, cut those out, probably not, or just go ahead and decal them where they're supposed to be. But I want to use these as markers, use those details as markers of where the decals should go. So anyway, so I'm just putting this on. So as you can see, I've just taken a little bit of this Tamaya tape. You guys have all seen, excuse me, on that side. You guys have all seen this. And I'm just putting it right here. You can just see it right there, nicely on there, on that side. For some reason, I thought there were windows on this front quarter other than the three. Of course, there's some debate on what those three are. Some people call them the backup deflector array. Other people call them forward portholes. Don't know. Anyway, so we've got this all taped off, and what I'm going to start doing is just going over it with some sandpaper just to kind of see where I am on this. I glued it down with this stuff. I wound up using that because unfortunately this did not do it well at all, and it was very, very frustrating. I was a little bit annoyed. And additionally, I had that in a couple of key spots, but it didn't work well either. So this is the stuff that seemed to keep that upper saucer section down. But it just doesn't close up the gaps in the seam the way I wished it would. So I'm going to sand them. And what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to run my sandpaper over this just to kind of see what we've got and what it's going to take to close that up. It may be that I do a little wet sanding, which is likely what I'm going to do. If I wet sand, I literally just take some spit and put it on the spot where I'm going to sand, take the sandpaper or the file, and I go over it, and that just closes up those gaps really, really well. And I'll show you how to do that, but I'm going to turn the camera off and I'm just going to kind of see what I've got here real quick. Okay, you can kind of see where this is heading here. So this is about where we were, what it looked like. Now when you come back around here, you can see where I've gotten a lot of the paint knocked off, but at the same time, you can see that seam, that upper level is starting to go away. It's going to get tricky as I get over this tape because I got a big gash there, but it's coming along, and it just takes time and patience. And the other thing I would tell you to do is to wet sand it and wet file it. Now I've got a couple of different files here. So I've got some 80 grit sandpaper here. At the same time, I've got a really fine metal file here that I use a lot. And then I've got one, this is a fine file, but it's not quite as fine in terms of its cut as that little one. And what I'll do is really just wet my finger, right? Come up over it, get it on the area that I want to do, right? And I just start filing. Because you want to knock some of that plastic off. That's really a big chunk of it, sorry, pardon the pun, but you want to knock some of that off. And once you get it knocked off, then you come back and again, keep it wet. And what it does is it knocks some of that plastic into the seam a little bit, and it kind of acts like a putty almost. You just start getting that knocked down and you get rid of the ridge. That's really part of it, is getting rid of where the seams are, getting rid of that one higher, one lower ridge. And then you can come back with your sandpaper, start knocking it down. Works really, really, really well. Now, I'm not saying it's going to get it all done in one move. No, that's not it. You got to keep coming back at it and working it. But you'll see it starts to make a difference. See, it's already making a difference. It just takes time and patience. That's all it is. I'm going to keep working on this, and then I'm going to come back around at different spots and show you the progress. So here's some progress. If you can look at that really closely, give that to you kind of right about there. might be able to see that there's still a little hickey right there. I've gotten a lot of this smoothed out nicely across here, all the way back to the tape, and kind of stopping there. I started over there, but I've been kind of focusing on this one area where this hickey is, trying to get that gap to fill in. And it just takes, again, it's repetition. It's going over it and over it and over it. And you do want to be careful that you don't kind of just, disfigure this thing. But you got to go over it very carefully. And so what I'll do here is, again, I'm going to go right back to it, and I'm going to put a little spit on it. Just right about there. I'm going to come back with this guy right here, and I'm going to file it, and I'm going in an orbital fashion, right? I'm not going this way. I'm going in a circular orbital fashion. You can go counterclockwise or counterclockwise, whatever you want to do. And I tend to do both, but you just keep working on that. And you got to, in this case, I'm going to apply a little more pressure than usual. Normally I put very light pressure on it and just kind of let the file do its work. But this time I've got to put a little pressure on it because I've got to get that closed up. But I don't need too much. But it looks like I've got it. So I'm going to come back, wet it again. Just keep it wet with some spit. Take my sandpaper, my 80 grit, and come back over it, sand it. And I kind of go a little bit side to side with the sandpaper. And then sometimes I'll do a little bit of an orbital motion on it. And when I think I've got it, I want to look at it. And it's just about there. Now, one little trick I'm going to teach you right now is if you want to know you've got it smooth, your fingertips are not enough. That helps, and you can tell a lot, but take your fingernail and just brush it along the area that you're sanding against it, perpendicular to it, and you'll find out real quick whether or not you've gotten your seam, gotten rid of it, because you won't feel it. Your fingernail won't get hung up on a spot. So I still have that little hickey right there, and I'm going to do some more on this. Okay, so I think I've got this. I'm going to give you a good look at it, and you can see that hickey's pretty much gone away. And I think once I lay down another coat of paint on this edge, it's going to be really, really nice. But obviously I've got to go all the way around and work the rest of the seam. But you see how to do it, and I'm going to get all that done. But here in a few minutes, I'm going to start working on this one, because this is where it really gets complex, is above that tape. And it may be, in this case, the tape might not want to work, but we're going to try it anyway, keep going with it all the way back around here till we get to where the impulse exhaust will be. And I'm not going to worry about that too much, because the exhaust grid will, the exhaust port will cover that up. But point being is, we're going to work on all of this and get it nice and smooth, and then we'll come back around and do it all the way over here as well. Okay, so I had to take a different tack with that one small section. I could not get rid of the hiccup right above the windows. So you can see where I've got it taped, and I've put out some putty on that and spread it around. I kept filing and filing and filing, and it was not going to get rid of that. It's sort of a gash, really, almost left over from where I was clipping that, and it broke off, didn't clip well. Anyway, long story short, putty. And this is the stuff that I use. You can, there's other products out there. It's whatever you like. Anyway, so I dab it on there, and again, I use a wet finger, and I just kind of spread it around to kind of fill in and contour into that spot. I'm going to let this set up and dry overnight. I'm not going to touch it, and I'll come back tomorrow, and I'll start sanding it and smoothing it just a little bit. Probably use my fine sandpaper on that, just so I don't take too much of it off, because I've almost got it where I want. And then I can finish up kind of this area, and then go back here and get all that finished up. Come back around, get all of this done. I suspect I'm going to have another spot where I'm going to have to putty that in, but I'm going to see how this works overnight before I commit to that. So I'm just going to let this do its thing, let nature take its course, let the putty cure, come back in, sand, and go at it. Okay, so the first thing I did was pour a cup of coffee and come in here and take a look and see how that putty dried overnight. Clearly the putty it dried well, but there was enough of a seam in there that it drew into the seam. So it filled it in partially, but not enough. So I've come back across with some more putty, and I'm going to let that dry today and cure so that I can come back and sand it smooth. I went ahead and took the tape off from the porthole and the window indications details, and literally it's because when the putty dries, it'll leave a ridge, and I'm going to have to sand it down anyway. So I'm just going to sacrifice those details. And because I'm doing decals for the windows back here, I'm not going to worry about it. I can approximate where the location's going to be. And if I get lucky and I'm able to save these, then I can kind of balance it out. But if not, stuff happens. So I'm going to cure this, and then I'm going to move on to something else. We'll go on and do some nacelles, or we'll do the secondary hole or something like that.